Good morning, everyone. Firstly, a sound check. Can everyone hear me? Just a nod to those that I can see. Andrea, thank you. Welcome to our side event, the Sustainable Development Goals in the Canadian College and Institute sector. It's called Farther Together because it really demonstrates what a pan-Canadian multi-institutional initiative can achieve. And we're going to talk about the ImpAct initiative this morning with 4 panelists. I, as Tricia O'Connor, have been working with CICan for the last 18 months on the ImpAct initiative, and I've really been fortunate to work with the 4 panelists that you're going to be hearing from today. I'll be the moderator for the session. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that I'm in Peterborough, Ontario, and so I respectfully acknowledge that I am moderating from the traditional territory of the Mississauga Nishnawbeg First Nation, and we are grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and learn on this traditional territory and Turtle Island as a whole, as I recognize that there are folks here from across the country. Just going to the first slide, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the ImpAct initiative. The ImpAct initiative has been a major initiative by Colleges and Institutes Canada over the last 2 years. And so it involves colleges, institutes, polytechnics, and universities that have a community development mandate. It's been generously supported by the McConnell Foundation. And it really has been to sort of collate and collect institutions across the system to amplify the sector's contribution to social and economic well-being, as well as environmental well-being, and support the advancement of the UN SDGs. The initial call went out for ImpAct when it was launched in late 2019 for institutions to become involved, and a number of them stepped up. About 25 initially, there are more now, and it was officially launched with an event in Ottawa in February, and everyone knows what happened in March of 2020. What has been amazing is these institutions and the many representatives have stayed with the initiative over the last 2 years and really dedicated incredible time and energy to the ImpAct initiative. And that's why we call it Farther Together. There are 4 project working groups, and it's the members here today that are representing each of these project working groups. So the 4 project working groups and the major pillars of ImpAct are reducing barriers to inclusive access, social entrepreneurship, campus sustainability, which really has a focus on climate action as well, and the SDG Accord. The SDG Accord was sort of born a little bit later in the project because it was recognized that it needed a distinctive project working group, and it is tied to advancing the Accord, which is an international SDG Accord for higher education, agreeing to advance the SDGs in all aspects of the institution: academic, research, community development, and operations. So going to the next slide, I am thrilled to have the opportunity to introduce the panelists, and I'm going to introduce them in the order that they will speak today as well. So firstly, for social entrepreneurship, and in Atlantic Canada, we have Sherry Williams, and she's the manager of entrepreneurship in Nova Scotia Community College in the Campus and Communities Department, focusing on the entrepreneurship portfolio. And it is a portfolio that advances entrepreneurship for students across the entire province, because NSCC is a college that is sort of represents the entire province of Nova Scotia. So they provide a skill development and entrepreneurial experience to advance and really highlight for students that entrepreneurship is a really good career alternative. And if anyone follows the GEM report or the Global Entrepreneurship Monitoring Report, they'll know that entrepreneurship is a really growing field for millennials in particular. And even in the last 2 years with the pandemic, there's been a lot of advancement, a lot of activity in entrepreneurial growth. Next, we have Zina Sleeman, and she's from the other side of the country, comes to us from Northwest College in Alberta, and she is the academic projects and innovation lead. Zina has helped develop innovative approaches to increasing inclusivity in education and community-based settings. She's an avid proponent for greater equity and accessibility for Canadian newcomers and she is the co-chair of the Reducing Barriers to Access to Education. She has over 10 years experience in research and development in the area of immigration, citizenship, and settlement, and she's the author of Sanctuary Regions and the Struggle for Belonging. So next we have Chris Adam. We're going to go to Quebec. He hails to us from Dawson College in Montreal, and he directs the Sustainability and Living Campus office at Dawson. And if you've ever been there, it's a pretty impressive college. He has been recognized nationally and internationally for designing and implementing sustainability-related projects and leadership in education. His background is quite varied: wildlife management, leadership training and development, entrepreneurship, and he has a holistic filter through which he works. His passion is the living campus or living schools that connects people, community, and nature. And last but certainly not least is Lan Chi Weeks, and she's currently the Director of Facilities and Protection Services for La Cité College, so in Ontario, located in Ottawa, and she's worked for 30 years in the facility field, which includes hazardous material management, green building, and energy reduction, and she's with the Campus Sustainability Group. And I will say as well that Chris sits on two, he's doing double duty. He sits on both the SDG Accord as well as the Campus Sustainability. So when we get to questions, he can also take questions for either of those project working groups. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Sherry Williams.
Thank you, Trish, and to the CICan team for including me today in this presentation. And I also want to thank the Social Enterprise Working Group for allowing me to be part of the work that we've been doing on the Humans of Impact over the last couple of years. So I'm pleased to be here today to represent the Humans of Impact project. That's been a collective, a project that's been the brainchild of a collective of about 8 community colleges across the country. The Humans of Impact project touches on the 2 SDG goals of number 8 and number 17, but touches on a variety of other ones as well across the spectrum. In this project, it is basically a collection of stories that have been curated by students from across the country that represent social enterprise across the country. These stories are told by students, and they are a great promotional piece of not only the institutions that they represent, but the social enterprises that they're telling the story of. So you can see the website here, humansofimpact.ca. I invite you to hop on and have a look at some of the different stories that are available there. And you'll see that there are stories from Nova Scotia all the way to BC and everywhere in between. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the Humans of Impact project is really about building Canadian capacity, college capacity across the country to help students understand the value of social enterprise, and that social enterprise is not only a viable career option for them as they move through their programs in their institutions and as they pass on to the career that they have choice, but it's also a vehicle to build just and equitable societies across our country using the SDGs. And we want students to recognize that, you know, while they build their careers and they move in a direction, whatever the path they've chosen, that the SDGs are a lens of which they can travel down and look through as they develop the career path that they wish to take. So the why of the project is really around the best knowledge, recognizing that the best knowledge of social enterprise doesn't just reside in our institutions, but it's in our communities. And linking our students to those communities in their learning will also support those communities that they live and work in every day. So we want them to recognize that the social enterprises exist all around them and that they can be a catalyst in sharing that great information in their communities across the country and in their province to help their career path, to help their community, and to help those businesses to succeed. So how we did it, we developed a platform that allowed students to connect in and write stories about these enterprises. So they met with the enterprises in their region, they worked through the creation of these stories, and then they presented the stories on the platform to be utilized in a variety of different ways across the country. The long-term goal here is to build deeper relationships between our institutions and our social enterprises in our regions, to let them know that we are there to support them, that those social enterprises are a direction that our students want to move into, and that students can embrace social change in their career and still turn a profit in that sense. Next slide, please. So this slide gives you a sense of the colleges that were part of the partnership. It was an in-depth partnership that began 2 years ago, back at the beginning of the pandemic, but continued to move forward using a variety of virtual ways to keep this project moving. A number of teams came together and played a number of different roles as the project rolled forward. Everyone had a different focus area, but we all were working towards the same goals here. So we launched the website on September 17th to 26th during the Global Goals Week, and it is now fully up and operational and ready for others to take part in, to use the resources, but then also to contribute. So next slide. So I'm going to play a little bit of a video here, or actually a 4-minute video here, a trailer that gives you a sense of how the platform works, who was involved in the platform, and the value of the Humans of Impact project. I want to give some kudos here to our Georgian team, who were the development team behind the scenes in developing this video. And we're quite proud of the work that has been done both by Georgian, but then also the project as a whole.
I would say trust yourself and trust what you feel and write that down.
Not only is this about sharing their story, it's about challenging yourself.
You can really take it whatever you want it to go. And so just, yeah, being open to that.
In 2019, CICan launched the ImpAct initiative, funded by the McConnell Foundation to build on the shared values and aspirations of our members and amplify the college and institute system's contributions to the economic and social development and community well-being through advancing the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And many institutions across Canada answered the call to get involved. Our lives and the communities we live in are continuously changing. Adapting our thoughts and actions to this ever-present change is a crucial skill for us all. How can the work we do in an academic setting best fill this need to drive change in positive directions? How can we cultivate an environment where students become adept at connecting their work to the very real world around them? Those are some of the questions explored through the Humans of Impact project. For the past 2 years, 7 institutions across Canada in the Colleges and Institutes Canada Network have been collaborating with students to raise the awareness of social enterprise. Students connect more deeply with their own programs and passions by building a strong understanding of social enterprises in their community. Humans of Impact receive funding through the Cooperative Education and Work Integrated Learning, or CWIL, by the way of CICan, and Humans of Impact was born. The ultimate outcome is an engaging online platform developed and curated by students to present compelling digital stories. Their voices, their stories of social enterprise as it relates to their work, lives, and social communities. Cultivating genuine, meaningful connections between students and the broader community has been one of the many challenges faced by all academic institutions in recent years. The Humans of Impact project rose to the challenge by providing students an unforgettable experience centered on positive social change. Students were offered a paid opportunity to interview and engage with social enterprises in their community, align the work with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and bring their own stories together through the process of digital storytelling. This storytelling process intentionally created space for students to align their stories with their own interests and area of study. It was an experimental learning process for the individual with tangible connections to the social landscapes ranging from local to global. Students worked through 4 interactive learning modules, connected as a large group, and had one-on-one opportunities with facilitators throughout the project. The final submissions and stories were published to the Humans of Impact website, which was also developed and built by students. Humansofimpact.ca is the ultimate outcome and includes student representation from a cross-section of programs, including journalism, all the way to social service work. The consensus across all participants was that the project was meaningful and eye-opening. Each student will integrate their experiences from the project to their future careers in different ways. So, how can the work we do in academic settings drive positive change? How can we create connections between students, their work, and the very real world around them? Humans of Impact has shown us one pathway that can be taken, and there's still much to explore. After all, our lives and communities we live in are continuously changing.
Thank you, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker. I believe there's some questions at the end, which will dive a little bit further into the project.
Thank you, Sherry. So Zena.
Thanks, Sherry. Thanks, Trish. I co-chair the Reducing Barriers working group, and our focus is really on creating more accessibility for our post-secondary institutions. When we started the work, we were looking to sort of launch an initiative that would essentially reduce barriers. And of course, as Trish mentioned, that this happened just before the COVID-19 pandemic. And so when the pandemic happened, we had also realized that so many of our students who were already facing challenges in accessing education and post-secondary were being pushed to the margins even further. And a lot of our institutions also began to sort of think creatively about ways to minimize that, but also for a lot of the students who were already struggling in the pandemic with accessing their education, we saw a lot of students leave post-secondary due to some of those challenges. And so there was a lot of conversations around what it is that we can do. Yet at the same time, we all came from different post-secondary institutions in different regions across the country. As you know, the panelists here, we all kind of come from different areas of Canada, and our communities face different challenges, and the demographics of our communities are also very unique and different. And so with that in mind, we were a little bit inspired by the Humans of Impact work. And we realized that as we were going into the pandemic and sort of further into it, that there was a lot of things that we were all doing that were unique to the needs of our communities and garnering funding that was different based on the provinces that we came from. And so instead of creating one sort of initiative that could be piloted across the country, we created the Reducing Barriers to Education webpage. And so if I can go to the next slide. And what this does, again, we were very much inspired by the Humans of Impact work, which you just saw. And the focus here is on creating a narrative around all of the different initiatives that are already established in the country. And I should also note that in the earlier stages of our conversations around reducing barriers, we also acknowledge that so many barriers that we face come from just because our institutions have been designed through colonial perspectives, and also that there's a lot of discrimination built into the way that our institutions are designed, and also in the way that accessibility is designed when it comes to post-secondary. And we really saw that highlighted through the pandemic. And so with that, we started thinking about what each of our institutions was already doing and what we had been doing to reach some of those students that had disappeared. So we took the stories from our different institutions. Northwest College is one of them. We have institutions from across the country, from different provinces. And we collected these stories and rewrote them out and created this webpage that is meant to sort of, again, create these narratives around the successes of different programs and different initiatives. I myself, in my own line of work, have been doing this for quite a while. My primary role at Northwest is to develop and manage projects that are focused on creating greater opportunities for a lot of our newcomer learners, but also doing it in a way that minimizes some of those barriers, things like tuition fees or application fees or accessibility in terms of just getting to campus or learning online, etc. And the website, the Reducing Barriers to Inclusive Access to Education, the webpage was designed and developed by students who supported the work. And so we wanted to tap into, again, some of those experiences from the students. If you can go to the next slide, please. So the goal of the initiative was to collect all of these stories, but there's a bigger picture in that. And what we wanted to do is garner the experiences and the knowledge from institutions and colleges across the country. And so the webpage has a submission category. And we would love, if there's people attending here, that we would love to hear more about your own initiatives and sort of what you've been doing to reduce those barriers before the pandemic, after the pandemic. So on the webpage, there's a submit your story page. And on there, you can go in and sort of, describe your institutions, the different programs that you'd like to highlight, and submit your story. And that gets reviewed by someone on our committee, and then it gets posted on the webpage. And the goal and the idea is to create as many stories and as many projects that can then be highlighted on the webpage. Because ultimately, again, I think there's a lot of, there can be a lot of innovative work that can come out of sharing some of those experiences. And we recognize that the funding models differ from one province to another. So I think there'll be a little bit of, challenges when it comes to replicating things very specifically. But the goal is to try to encourage some of that innovative reflectiveness and to not have to duplicate some of the work, and create it in a way that is catered and custom to the community, to the needs of that community. We work very much within our community. We are Edmonton based, and our learners have their own unique needs. Our economy is very unique. And so the idea is to take some of these projects and initiatives and think about how we can potentially create similar initiatives that will be unique to the needs of our specific learners and of our community as a whole. I have my contact on this page as well. Again, the website is, although I think Trish has linked it directly in the chat, it's called Reducing Barriers to Education and .org, I think. Trish, do you want to just?
Yeah, .ca.
Okay,
so yeah, actually Andrea put it in the chat. Thank you very much. It's
awesome.
Also
Thank
embedded in the presentation, which I think typically are shared after the fact.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thanks. And then my email is on there as well. If you have any questions or feedback, we would love to hear it. And yeah, thanks. I'll hand it over to the next presenter.
So thank you very much, Sana, and congratulations. Today is the official launch of the digital platform for reducing barriers. So there's a Canada-wide communique that's being released from CICan, and I see the note has already gone in the chat that there are new stories already in the works to go into your website. And that's really the idea of both the Humans of Impact and Reducing Barriers, is they're digital platforms that are going to grow beyond this project, right? With an opportunity for sharing and submitting best practices from across Canada and institutions. So congratulations to both on a great accomplishment. And I'm going to pass it on to Chris now. Chris Adam.
Thank you. So I do represent the SDG Accord and work with a wonderful group of people that are trying to encourage institutes of higher education across Canada to join the Accord. And I'm starting with a photo of Dawson College, and I would appreciate if everyone think of their own college. I'm very proud to work at Dawson, and I'm sure our participants here feel the same for the institution they work for. But what we've done at Dawson is look at the SDGs. We did sign the Accord. We do realize there's a report and there is some work to be done, which is something that is a problem with some people. What will signing an Accord do in terms of human resource needs, budgets? So I'm here to say 50% of the work is signing. Taking the risk as an institute of higher education is something I think we have a responsibility to do. And then to be bold enough to say, we've got rich material happening within our building, outside of our building, that we can identify that meet some of these SDG icons on paper. How do they jump off the page, if you like, in our institutions? And I'm finding as I work with more colleges and universities, there's a lot of work being done that has to be identified. And that's really encouraging before you start to think about perhaps a new program. And an example here with this photo is we are in downtown Montreal. We're actually in 1.5 kilometers from the downtown core, little postage stamp of green that we've worked really hard on for 15 years. We don't have a lot of research capabilities, so we have a partnership, ICON 17, And we partner with a Mexican engineering university, and they need topics to do their thesis work on. We've had 4 different students now work on how much rain hits our landscape and our rooftop. Where does it go? How much snow actually lands in Montreal? And where does it go if we remove it? We didn't have the capacity to do that, but through a partnership, we get great work. We now put our snow, for example, on our own landscape. It adds water. It helps our gardens. We have rooftop gardens in which we actually deliver food down the street to one of the poorest areas, to the homeless. So we touch upon poverty, hunger, life on land, life in the water. Imagine the pipes underneath our building that go 30 kilometers east to our filtration plant in Montreal, and then it goes into the river. And all the pumps that it takes to take our rooftop water and our snow melt down those pipes. So infrastructure is involved and healthy communities. Now I can go on for quite a while, but that's all of our institutions. So we just don't say, well, it's a climate action because now we don't truck our snow away and there's less greenhouse gases. It's part of our climate action. It's part of our life on land. It's part of our approach to hunger in our own environment down the street. And once you start identifying these things, you start to realize, I think I need to sign the SDG Accord because I want to share all this great work my institution's doing. And because we're so big, we often don't know the good work that's happening. So I'll go through some other slides quickly. Next one, please. This is what's happening under those trees as we meet some of these SDG Accord topics. We want to reconnect people, community, and nature. And in doing so, this was part of our reaction, I have to be honest, to a tragic shooting in 2006. We needed to heal. And we thought one of the ways was to invite nature back into our environment. But now all of us have our own tragedy in COVID. And it's magnified some of these social issues, isolation and mental health. So this is perhaps one way as well of coping with sort of post-COVID strategy and integrating the SDGs at the same time. Next slide, please. So if you want to know more information about the Accord itself, CICan is obviously involved with the ImpAct program, and there's material on the website there. You sign up by actually getting your president or director general to sign on board. So that might be a challenge, but once you can, there is a report they ask for, and having a look at that report, it is wherever you are. And I emphasize again that I think the first step is to say that we as Canadian institutions need to sign on board. We're all about peace, ending poverty, inviting the environment, a healthy environment back into our cities. And we do have an important role to do so. I don't think it's onerous. I'm involved in many reports, and if it was that example I gave you or your own institution, you could start with landscape, you could start with facilities, you could start with any food justice or security program that you had. And I think that would be a great way to start. And then we pool that information through these organizations that you see on the right-hand side of the screen that have signed on already. I'm sure there's many more that could and could offer best practices to all of us. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide I'd like to mention to you. And what we've done, the pie chart you see on the left is all of our programs that touch any one of the 17 goals. We're just working with that, and we hope to have that as mineable data for our students and our staff. The one in the middle, at the same time, we're part of the ASHE STARS system, so we also look at which objectives have been met there. And the smaller one on the right, while we're doing the work, we take it right across our Excel sheet and we look at our city sustainability objectives and what's met there through the SDGs as well. We have not shared this with our community yet, and it's 2 years old. We hope to do that soon. And I think it may look that Dawson's done a lot of work with the SDGs, and I feel we have behind the scenes, but all of this work was done without a single meeting of any dean in our institution. They simply didn't have the time, and that's okay. So then we start with other departments and we start to build on it, and teachers come on board, and this is the result. So I'll leave that with you, and if there's any questions about that, I'll be more than happy to answer questions later. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Chris. It's always inspiring to hear your perspective. Yeah, the aerial shot of your campus is beautiful, and there was a kudos in the chat that they were there 22 years ago, and it looks a lot greener now. So great work. And I see a pretty impressive list too of signatories for the SDG Accord that you showed. I think it's about 20 Canadian. That's only a small representative of the national signatories, of course, but we continue to encourage institutions to consider signing the SDG Accord. So thank you very much for providing that overview, as well as the information and about the incredible work happening at Dawson. I'm going to lastly pass it to Lanji, and yeah, there you are. Over to you, Lanji. Thanks.
Trish. Every time I hear you talk, Chris, I'm elated of everything that's going on, and then I just want to be depressed in my little corner because I'm not doing so much at my college. But anyway, thank you for having me here today. The reason why we actually joined the Sustainable Campus Project Working Group is because there wasn't much going on at the college at the time that the call for interest came out from CICan. And I thought, oh, wow, this is interesting. We're talking about a multi-institution collaboration across Canada. And at the same time, it feels very targeted to the college and institute community, as opposed to a very generalized, project that involved different sectors. It was very confined to the college sector, and I felt comfortable with that, joining that and say, I want to see what other colleges are doing across Canada. So I think that's the same vision has been shared across all the working group, which is really to see what we can do together, what we can share, and how we can, share best practices and do things that can be scaled to apply that across the country. So obviously the vision of this particular working group was to look at how do we reduce greenhouse gas emission. Obviously, as I was saying earlier, it really depends on the proficiency level of participating college. Some colleges are quite advanced in what they're doing already. They are multiple years into the process of accounting for their GHG, and some colleges are just barely started. And also, I think one of the difficulty when we started was to understand how do you do accounting for GHG. It's not as simple as just lining up some numbers and adding them up. Next slide, please. So why did I join? As I say, I joined the project working group because as a director of facilities, I'm responsible for the good health and well-being of people occupying the building, but also responsible for anything that's energy use and savings and anything that's also need management in terms of land and water and waste. And as a college, we certainly want to make sure that there's a zero hunger going on in what we're doing, for our students and for our community, on top of giving, obviously, a quality education. So I needed, when I started, signing up to be a member of this project group, for everybody to help me understand the problem. Because as an engineer, I look at it strictly from an energy point of view. I didn't have much knowledge about the well-being and the space, like what is happening at Dawson, and how do you control better without necessarily sacrificing that side of the coin, if you want, and how do you make people change behavior? Because as you know, engineers, what we do is we turn on the heat, we turn off the heat, we turn on the air conditioning, we turn off the air conditioning, but all that being said is how people use the space that really impact what's going on. I can talk as much as I want, I can recycle as much as I want, but if the people putting things in the garbage is not conscious about what they're doing, it's not going to help me any. Next slide, please. So as we were saying, all these projects started just before the pandemic, and the project working group thought, we're going to pivot. So instead of starting immediately on doing what we were supposed to do as tasks, we thought that, you know what, we're going to write an open letter to three ministers, the ministers of infrastructure and community of Canada, environment and climate change, and also of Canadian heritage, to talk about how we can build better, because we're not going to be in the pandemic forever. And when recovery happens, it's time to do better. We can take that opportunity, if you want, rabbit ears, to do better than what we were doing. And let's think about it now when, yes, we're still in the pandemic and so on, but there's nothing like planning ahead. After we've done that letter and that kind of promotion, we went ahead and did the GHG inventory from the 7 participating institution, as well as CICan, on a common platform. And that's allow us to be able to compare, to have a certain confidence in the data that's been input on the same platform, so that we can actually do proper comparison. And after we have done that, we had a third party look at all the inventories and say, what can be a common goal? What can you as a group do to reduce GHG? And when we're doing that, we're sharing good practices and lessons, among colleges, and we wanted to create a library of good practices. Everything that Chris does, I want to do, hopefully sooner than later. But and that's what I was saying. The energy and the enthusiasm of being part of such a group, where there are people that gone a long way and people that's just starting, is just great. So that's all what I have. If you have any questions for me, I think there's a questions period following this.
Great, thank you, Lanchi. And you raised a number of good things, but you used a word scaling, and certainly, the 7 participating institutions, you're right, they were in different plateaus or different levels in terms of climate action and greenhouse gas inventories, et cetera. And you've learned from each other, but you're also developing a best practice to be released publicly about what you've learned. So again, the work carrying on beyond the 2 years. So thank you. Congratulations to all our panelists. Just before we go to the questions, I want to recognize the person in the background who makes a lot of this happen, and it's Andrea Fournier. She pulls up the presentation. She puts things in chat just in time. So thank you, Andrea. I don't see her face right now, but thank you very much for making everything happen in the background. And Judy Vargatoth is with us as well, who is the leader of all of this initiative as a manager with Colleges and Institutes Canada. Lots of energy Judy has. Anyway, I'm going to pass it on. I'm going to recognize the questions here. And the first question is for you, Sherry, around the humans of impact. And the question is, what are your recommendations for universities to implement projects like humans of impact?
Thank you, Trish, and that's a great question. The great news is that the heavy lifting has already been done. So we have the framework fully developed for those institutions, including universities that are interested in taking on a project such as this. What we've recognized is partnership is key. Working together with, whether it's your local community partners, social service providers that are in your area, to work together and pool your resources to help make something like this happen. As a group, we'd be happy to share the resources that we have developed, including our website and the framework and the approach that we've had. We can also, work with you directly and share a little bit about our tactics and what that looked like. This project is fully scalable. It can be as small or as small or as big as you want it to be, given, even just in representation of our site now, we're Canada-wide, but it could be as easy as doing something within your local community.
Great, thank you, Sherry. And there's another question that I'm going to reference something that was just put in the chat. So the next question is for you, Chris, and we could even tag team this one if you want it. How does signing the accord hold post-secondaries accountable to make real progress on the goals?
Well, in the reporting, you do have to mention what your plan was, how you implemented that plan, what the outcomes were, and typical types of reports that we're used to in our institutions. I mean, I just like to add though, I think the reaction I often get, both internally and from other institutes that I deal with, is this whole notion of we're so busy, you know, everything is translated immediately into a potential barrier of increased work and responsibility. And I think as a post-COVID strategy, that is absolutely on everyone's mind, every administrator, when they say, what are we going to do? And what are we going to do? We are part of the answer, if not a big part of the answer. That there is a real thirst on the part of staff, both faculty and non-faculty, and most definitely students, for this sense of belonging, well-being, giving back to their planet, helping each other. And I think we need to tap into it through the SDGs. So we are part of a wellness program for our institutions. And that's, I think, a wedge we have to use.
Thanks, Chris. And just on a very more technical or tactical aspect, there's a survey that's completed by those that sign on to the SDG Accord, and you do need to report within 2 years. And also they use it, now they're using a case study approach to reporting. So it's a template that you complete with your case studies, and then everything is collated annually and reported to the UN High Level Commission.
And that's anonymous, I believe.
Yeah, it's, well, I mean, it would identify, I think it does identify the institutional. I'd have to go back and check the report again, but I believe the institution that's tied to an initiative is identified in the commission report. Okay, so there was a comment from ECCC, and I saw that it's already been addressed. So it was around Environment and Climate Change Canada, that they have an education program, and thank you to the person from CICan who oh, it was Lanchi, sorry. I'm not sure who addressed it, but it's been addressed. So there's a connection there, and we can follow up after as well, Judy. And there's a question here from the audience: where does the budget for the projects you're undertaking come from? And is this a barrier for taking on your SDG projects? Probably anyone could take that. But I mean, Chris has spoken. I don't know, Sherry, do you want to tackle that one, or back over to Chris? Or Lanchi, really anyone. I guess that would be for any of the panelists.
Well, I mean,
go ahead, Lanchi.
From my side, I mean, for the SDG project, I take that from my operation budget, because I think that understanding, greenhouse gas emission and how to reduce it and doing other SDGs, really, it's part of how I manage the facility. So I take some of the budget from there.
And I do as well. Right now it's operational, but at the beginning we had very little support, and we went through a nonprofit charity to get a grant that then did the work for Dawson. Once the importance of that was recognized, then it continually evolved into what it is today, an office with a budget. But I think we have an adage where any problem or barrier is just a challenge, and then we just try to get the right people, often students, who say, let's just do it somehow, and find a way around it. And then the college comes on board very often after that, not proactively.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I see it has come up to the 11:45 time frame, and we're getting queued up here that we'll be completing the session. I want to thank all the panelists, Andrea as well, and the many participants, and your great questions. So thanks, and have a great afternoon.